All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final event of the Love and Libations series. Tonight, we have a really great event to put everyone in the Valentine's Day spirit. I am joined by Rich Buchanan, who is the Education Director at Moet Hennessy. We also have Chad Gibson, who is the Wines Marketing Specialist with the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlets. And my name is Shannon, and I'm a member of the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlet social team. I'm going to be moderating tonight as Rich talks to us about all things bubbly. He's going to be providing us with a deeper look into sparkling wines and champagne. So for those of you that have pre-registered for tonight's event and are joining us on the Zoom window, we're going to be giving away 5 bottle stoppers for those bubbly beverages that you all enjoy. So Rich is going to be asking some trivia questions. So be sure that you're listening super closely to tonight's presentation for the chance to win, and we will be picking the winners for that. So Rich, with that, I'll pass it over to you and your lovely bookcase. Let's talk about bubbly.
Excellent. Thank you, Shannon. Hello, everyone in New Hampshire. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that you're giving away bottle stoppers. As someone who's in the champagne business, I never have enough bottle stoppers. It's a very common request from people. I need bottle stoppers. So I'm excited that you're giving those out as prizes. Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here. Stoked? Okay, I'm super stoked to be here. I have a little, because I do these events all over the country, and I have a little bio that I send out to people. And I say, here's my bio. You can use it for your invitation or whatever. And on my bio, the last sentence says, and his favorite thing in the world is Rosé champagne. So I'm legitimately excited to be here and talking about 2 rosé champagnes and 1 sparkling wine rosé. So this is legitimately my favorite topic. So I came up with a little list of what we're going to do tonight on our romantic date that we all have together. Number 1, I'll pick you up in a horse-drawn carriage. It's going to be pretty cold. Have some blankets. And we'll ponder a few basics of sparkling wine. Number 2, I'll show you how to open a bottle of sparkling wine. Pretty good. Number 3, I'll propose a toast. Number 4, I'll share a few reasons why I love rosé. And then number 5, we'll taste. And the tasting order that I'm suggesting for the evening is we'll start with Shandon, Brut Rosé. Then we'll go from California to Champaign, and we'll stop off and have, we'll taste the Veuve Clicquot Rosé, and then we'll finish with the Moet and Shandon Rosé Imperial. The idea here is purely about kind of the tasting order. I think the Moet is a fairly bigger, bolder style wine, so I thought it would be the nice thing to end on. So that's our tasting order. But don't worry, I will review this as the night goes on. One more thing, as Shannon mentioned, we have a chat challenge, and I'm excited that you're giving away stoppers. How cool is that? All right, so let's quickly talk about a couple basics of sparkling wine, of champagne, and of rosé, and then we can go and start tasting, because that's what we wanted to do tonight. Remember, all bubbles are not champagne. And the way I think about it is we have a big umbrella, and the big umbrella is wine. And underneath that umbrella is a bunch of different types of wine, including sparkling wine. And sparkling wine as a category is about 10% of the wine world. So if you look at every bottle of wine produced in the world, about 10% of that will have bubbles in it. And then within the bubble world, within sparkling wine, we have various types of sparkling wine. And generally, in most parts of the world, if you're in the United States, if you're in New Zealand, if you're in Australia, if you're in Argentina, Brazil, it's just known as sparkling wine. If we're in California, we'll say, oh, California sparkling wine. But there are certain areas that are so renowned for their sparkling wine that they actually have a proper name. So in Spain, we could be drinking Cava. In Italy, we could be drinking Lambrusco or Prosecco. And in Champagne, arguably, the epitome of this category, of course, we have Champagne. So to me, like I said, this big umbrella is wine. We have sparkling wine. And then what separates these sparkling wines is where it is made and then how it is made. And I can answer these questions later as we taste through the wines about maybe the differences of processor grapes, but that's very kind of top line general differences in sparkling wine. And by the way, no matter where you are, it's usually a fairly difficult process to make sparkling wine. Even in California, it's not the easiest thing to make because basically you're making wine and then you're making wine again. So you're making wine almost twice. And that second process is where we get the bubbles. And then the poor folks in Champaign have some of the worst weather and some of the worst soil, and they have to make it there as well. So it's, it's fun. I love sparkling wine. I love Champagne, but it's actually quite difficult to make. You're going to see these three grapes. If we're talking about sparkling wine, someone's probably mentioning Chardonnay or Pinot Noir. Those are the two main grapes that we see made around the world if they're making sparkling wine. We see this in California, we see this in Argentina, we see this in Australia, and of course we see it in the Champagne region. There's a third grape you'll often see as well, which is called Meunier. And it is primarily a sparkling wine grape. I would recommend though, if you're in California, go by the Shandon winery, and they sell at the winery. They don't sell it to retail or anything, but at the winery, they make a red wine from Meunier. So you can just buy, if you want to see what Meunier tastes like by itself, Shandon, I think, is one of the few wineries in the world that makes a red Meunier. But these are our three primary grapes for sparkling wine and the three primary grapes that you have in the Champagne region. Okay, but tonight we're talking about Rosé, which is my favorite thing in the world. And I think, especially, I think this is very true in the United States. I think it's true in other countries as well. They don't admit it, but I think it is true in other countries. But Rosé has these kind of preconceived notions. And I know that when as soon as I turned 21, I started thinking about alcohol. I already had this preconceived notion that if it was pink, it was sweet. And, that's a valid thought, because especially the things that you're drinking maybe in your early 20s, or maybe my parents were drinking in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, were often these slightly sweeter style wines. And so it was box wine, and it was not serious. And as I said, it was traditionally fairly sweet, had some nice residual sweetness happening. So there is this preconceived notion, and I still hear about it to this day. I was doing a Dom Perignon tasting pre-COVID. We're doing the Dom Perignon Rosé, and someone said, "Oh, is this a sweet wine? I don't like sweet wines." And I wanted to say, "This is the Dom Perignon Rosé, one of the greatest things created." But I said, "No, of course, this is dry." So in the Champagne region, so I know we're tasting California sparkling from Shendon very soon, but let's just talk about Champagne and the Champagne region. In the Champagne region, Rosé is traditionally not sweet. So it's probably something like 98% of Rosé made in the Champagne region is dry. There's a tiny bit of sweet Rosé made, but it's a small percentage. These wines tend to be fairly complex because we have the red wine that they're actually making a red Pinot Noir and they're adding it to the white wine. And so you're bringing in, think about how complex Pinot Noir can be. And you have the notes of some tannins as well. So there's a complexity that regular Blanc Champagne wouldn't have. It is difficult to make, especially in the Champagne region, because making Champagne in the Champagne region is difficult in a good year. Making red wine in the Champagne region is even more difficult because it's fairly far north. And making a red wine up there, basically the fruit often doesn't ripen enough to get that color in the skin. So we can talk about that later if you like, but it's difficult to make. Champagne is difficult to make. Rosé Champagne is even more difficult to make. It is ideal for food pairing. I have a little slide coming up that shows you some food pairing ideas, but forget about that stupid slide because it will pair with everything. It is one of the most versatile wines in the world when it comes to food pairing. And then I would argue it's kind of the crown jewel. If you're visiting a champagne house, if you're visiting I have a bottle of Veuve Clicquot right here. If you're visiting Veuve Clicquot and you say, hey, winemaker, don't address them that way. Hello, nice winemaker. What is the greatest wine that you make? Well, Clicquot makes a wine called Le Grand Dame. And I would argue that they would say that the greatest wine we make is the Rosé version of Le Grand Dame. At Dom Perignon, I would argue that the greatest wine they make is their Rosé. So traditionally at these Champagne houses, you know, the pinnacle of the house is not just the fanciest wine they make, but it's often the Rosé version of that wine. So the crown jewel, food pairing, everything. We were talking about I just had a picture of the Dom Perignon Rosé on the screen, but we did a dinner. We basically did a steak dinner with that wine. It has so much power and complexity that sure, it can go up against beef, lamb, duck, all these proteins work so well with Rosé Champagne. But on the flip side, I mean, it is, for me, one of the pinnacles, sushi and champagne, and Rosé Champagne is spectacular with sushi. Pizza, the winemaker we're not tasting his wine tonight, but the winemaker from Renard, which is the oldest Champagne house in the Champagne region, he said, my last meal would be our Rosé and a sausage pizza. And I think people often think we're kind of joking that you could pair pizza with champagne, but it is a spectacular pairing because you have this lovely saltiness, right, with pizza, whether it's coming from the cheese or from the meat. And that saltiness plays really well with that brightness in the champagne. And then you have the cheese, and that brightness and that cheese go so well together. And then you have bread, and you have this yeasty note in champagne. So it is a really spectacular pairing, sausage pizza, or in this case, pepperoni pizza. Why am I talking about food right now? I'm starving. Okay. So let's talk about how to open and serve. And we'll start with our bottle of Shendon. You probably, majority of you have the Shendon Brut Rosé in front of you. I'll show you this little illustration and I'll open it myself, but I think I can do this all at once. Every little bottle has, let me show you the illustrations and then I'll actually do a live thing for you. Every little bottle has that little foil on the top, comes right off. It takes about 6 turns to undo the cage. As soon as you have that cage loose, you have a hand, a thumb, a towel, whatever you're used to on top of that bottle. You don't point this at anybody or anything breakable. That is so important. The lovely woman who married me, I hit her in the head once with a cork before we got married. And I'm still surprised that she married me after that. And then the trick is, and I'll show you how to do this. The trick is that we're going to hold the bottle nice and firm on the top, and we're going to turn from the bottom. All right, and then we'll have a nice little pop. So let me do this. Okay, there we go. We've got the little foil that comes right off. I'm opening the Moet, but you're opening the Shandon. I'm undoing the cage. Adjust my little camera here. You have to say do as you do that. So the cage is nice and loose. What I'm not doing is I'm not really taking the cage off. I just have it nice and loose. I mean, it's got lots of play here because I find that cage gives you a little extra grip and traction on that cork. I'm switching hands, and so the bottle now is at this 45-degree angle. This hand, nice and firm, holding the cork, and the cage is still up there. This hand is going to turn from the bottom. There we go. And I can already feel the cork coming out. Ooh, there we are. Ooh, excellent. Those of you who attended the one I did right before Christmas, I think I showed you one of my favorite little tricks, which is taking the cage and we wrap it around the stem of our glass. And now this is my glass. I know that for sure. That's how we open our bottle. If you have a cork, some dogs like corks, you can throw it to your dog. Temperature-wise, I think most people we keep it in our fridge, which is fine. If it's in your fridge, I would probably say take it out maybe 10 minutes before you want to serve it. Let it warm up a bit. We often serve our white wines too cold. and we serve our red wines too warm. So for white wine or champagne, it comes out of the fridge 10, 20 minutes before I want to open it. And for red wine, it goes in the fridge about 10, 20 minutes before I want to open it. Get this kind of more of a cellar temperature, unless you have a cellar. So got that. And then glasses. If you're using a flute, that is fine. If you're using a coupe, that is fine. These are all, if you're using a juice glass, that's great. But we do love just a proper white wine glass. The flutes are very pretty and they look great. But if you're actually really wanting to taste the wine, you're doing an event like this, where we're going to sit here and swirl it and talk about flavors and aromas. Oh, a wine glass works so much better because you get those aromas. All right, the aromas are so much part of that experience. All right. Oh, we have a chat challenge. I was not expecting this. Are we ready, Shannon, for the chat challenge?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to taste wine, but we're doing a chat challenge apparently. I like how I'm talking like I'm not in control of this. I literally set this whole thing up. Okay, rosé in the Champagne region usually is, rosé in the Champagne region is usually what? A is sweet, B is dry. Dry meaning not sweet. How's the chat looking?
Looking good. We got a lot of answers. Seems like B might be the popular answer, but isn't the correct one.
Oh, that is good. Let's see. Yes, there you go.
Woo!
Like I said, the majority of the time, probably, high mid 90s in terms of percentages of percent of wine produced in the Champagne region will be, it's going to be dry. Now, there is some sweet rosé, which is pretty amazing, but the rule is usually it's going to be dry.
Our first response on that one, Rich, was Kimberly Bolio. So congratulations, Kimberly. You are the first winner of our bottle stopper tonight.
Kimberly, will you be my Valentine? All right, let's do a quick little toast. If you've got your bottle of Shandon open, let's pour ourselves a little glass. All right, here's my toast. I thought this is one of my favorite toasts. And I realized, I was like, this is perfect for Valentine's Day. May we kiss who we please. May we please who we kiss. Cheers. It's very sad. I'm here by myself. I really want to kind of clink a glass or something. My wife will be back in a bit. All right. Oh, also I had a question. My own. What's up with this bookshelf? So it is not stacks of books. There literally is a metal spine running up the back of it, little metal shelves every, couple feet. It's a very convenient way to store your books. Apparently, that was a popular question earlier. Okay, because I'm super nice, I booked us a flight to California. Because let's be honest, it is super cold here. I'm in New York City. You guys are in New Hampshire. I know it's even colder there. We ate outside this morning for breakfast because we're crazy people, and it was 23 degrees. It's lovely croissants and coffee, but too cold. So we flown to California. We landed at SFO, San Francisco. We drove up to Napa. We stopped off for an In-N-Out burger. It's a pretty good day so far. So we're visiting Shandon. Question is Shandon a champagne? As we learned earlier, it is a sparkling wine, or arguably you could call it a California sparkling wine. So it's not a champagne. The story is this. We have two gentlemen here involved in terms of the creation of Shandon. Mr. Robert Jean de Vogüé on the left, he was the CEO of Moet and Shandon, the champagne house. And back in the 1950s, he said, you know what? I want to make more wine. But you know what? You can't do that in the Champagne region. The Champagne region is super regulated and super controlled. The region is really not expanding. So you can't really make more wine. And so one of his winemakers was given the job of traveling around the world and finding another place to go, finding pioneering a new wine region. And in 1959, they set up shop in Argentina. So the first Shandon property was in Mendoza in Argentina, which is kind of interesting. I think a lot of people assume that there's one Shandon, and if they know that's related to Moet Shandon, they think it's the only property, but there's actually 6 Shandon properties. So the first one's in Argentina in 1959. In California, we started the Shandon in California in 1973. There's 6 now. So we have one in Australia, we have one in Argentina, of course, we have one in Brazil, we have one in China, and we have one in India. And the cool thing is, they will often use some local grape varieties. This traditionally will be Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but they'll often use some local grape varieties, and they'll often design these wines to kind of meet the local cuisine. And so if you're the winemaker at Shandon in California, your coworkers, your colleagues are wine at the other properties, the 6 Shandon wineries together. So it's a pretty cool idea that Shandon is this, if you will, global, winery with 6 different wineries around the world, completely separate now from Moet and Shandon. So for California, Mr. Vogwe meets John Wright, who was, he had retired, he had been in banking, he'd done quite well, and he was a huge proponent and fan of California wine. He really wanted to put California on the map for fine wine. And this was the early 70s. It was not anyone's conversation yet that California can make fine wine. But not only was he looking to do fine wine, he said, sparkling wine here could be amazing. And so the two of them teamed up together, the French winemakers, and then John Wright, who had this posse of kind of hippie California winemakers, and they founded Shandon in 1973 in the town of Yountville. So born French, but if you will, raised in California, and it's literally embraced by our winemaker. So in the bottom left corner, that's Pauline Lott, who is the winemaker at Shandon. She was born in the Champaign region. She trained originally in the Champaign region and at Moet and Shandon, and then has been in California for, I think, almost close to a decade at this point, and took over the head winemaking position about 3 years ago. And we're super excited because nothing, of course, wrong with our former winemakers, but I feel like she has injected this amazing kind of use of some interesting new technology and some new techniques, and is really driven to deliver these wines that are very kind of fruit forward, very refreshing, and very bright. So I really legitimately, I think the wines at Shandon have never been better. So we have our winemaker. She's also annoyingly young. She's like 38 or something. She was part of the 40 under 40 at Wine Enthusiast a couple of years ago, this big award ceremony. So we're excited to have Pauline, our winemaker at Shandon. Okay, in your glass, let's talk about the wine. This is the Shandon Brut Rosé. So the prominent grape at Shandon is Chardonnay. So I talked about, we have the 3 kind of primary grapes we see in sparkling wine: the Pinot Noir, the Chardonnay, the Meunier. For Shandon, for this wine and their Brut Classic, which is their Blanc, it is going to be predominantly Chardonnay. So you're looking at probably 70 to 80% of that bottle will be Chardonnay. The Pinot Noir is a little bit lower. And I think that has if I can kind of almost editorialize, I think that has a little bit to do with the fact that Chardonnay in California can be so amazing. Pinot Noir is great in California, but to me, I think it gets eclipsed by what you can do with Chardonnay. So it makes sense that if you're doing a California sparkling wine, you would really highlight the grape that, in my opinion, does really, 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 really well there, and that would be Chardonnay. How does this become pink? That's a question we'll have to think about for all these wines. Why is this a pink wine? What they do is they actually will make a red wine. They'll make a red Pinot Noir, in the case of Shandon, in the case of Clicquot as well. They'll make a red Pinot Noir, and they're going to add it to the white wine. and that makes it pink. And so if you haven't already, I think we all have probably already tasted, but give it a little sniffy sniff, a little tasty taste. There are obviously those lovely kind of red fruit notes. So it's, I was thinking about, there's some, reminds me of something with cranberry, hints of strawberry, of course. It might be because I'm looking at pictures of strawberries right now. You get a little bit of that toastiness from the yeast because it spends about a year in the cellar resting with the leftover yeast in the bottle. So you get that lovely yeastiness. It's got a lovely freshness to it as well. This wine goes so well with grilled chicken. I know we're not grilling meat right now in the middle of wintertime, but this summer, grab some bottles, and when you have your cookout, try it out. It goes great with hamburgers as well, but to me, like grilled chicken with this wine is spectacular. Shannon, do we have any questions or anything? I feel like I've been talking for a long time.
Someone in our Zoom chat was actually curious if it's an 80% Chard, 20% Pinot, if that's like how it runs every single time, or is there,
Yeah, so I'm just super estimating here because it does change every time they make it. And in theory, if they make 2 batches in 1 year, which wouldn't be uncommon, the percentages would change as well. So it's just for the sake of, otherwise it'd be super confusing trying to figure out exactly which bottle everyone had and the exact percentages. It fluctuates, a little bit every time they make it, but it's predominantly, I always say it's predominantly Chardonnay, and that can range anywhere from 60 to about 80%. There will be some Pinot Noir, that's white wine. There may be some Meunier, that is white wine, but then you'll have about 10. So of that, all that wine together, they'll then add a little extra, about 10% of red wine to make that blend. So then it gets very confusing because now you're thinking, wait a minute, he just said 70% Chardonnay, and now we're adding 10%. So the math gets can get a little difficult. But so that's why I like to kind of generalize, because the numbers get a little confusing sometimes. So predominantly Chardonnay, 10% of that bottle will be red Pinot Noir, maybe 12%. It depends. That was the worst answer to that question.
No, I think we understand.
I'm quitting.
I think that you're doing a great job. There's not a lot of questions, more so just commentary in the chat right now, which is awesome.
Okay, excellent. Oh my God, chat challenge. I was not expecting this. Once again, I should be expecting this. All right, here we go. Our next question. The prominent grape in your Shandon Rosé. Holy moly, I just said this mere seconds ago. The prominent grape in your Shandon Rosé is what? I really should have downloaded the Jeopardy theme song for this.
It would have added an extra element.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a lot of responses. It seems to be that the popular response is C, Chardonnay, but is it the right answer?
There it is. Yes, I'm sorry, I stepped on your line there. Yes, it is the right answer.
All right, congratulations to Bill Ailman. You were our first response for Chardonnay.
Woohoo, Bill. Excellent. All right. So let's because California is way too pleasant. Let's go somewhere colder. We're going to jump on a plane. We're going to leave San Francisco. We're going to fly to Paris, to Charles de Gaulle, and we're going to drive out to the Champaign region. It'll be about an hour and a half drive. There will not be an In-N-Out burger on the way, unfortunately. And I've commissioned us a little hot air balloon to float around. And we have a quick little map of the Champaign region. And I mean, honestly, the important bits, the little colors you see on the map, those are different growing regions, but we won't dig too much into that. But to me, there's 2 cities. The city of Reims Reims. That's the city right near the Veuve Clicquot you see up there, and then the city of Epernay. And these are the two hubs of the Champagne region. And this is where, if you went to either Epernay or Reims, you could see a whole bunch of different champagne houses. So, like I said, they're kind of the two centers of the region. They are about 30 minutes apart. So this is not a big region. In terms of actual land, it is about the size, in terms of vineyard land, it's about the size of New York City, which if we only count like half of Queens. So it's actually a fairly small region. It's about the size, another one is the city of Denver is about the same size as the amount of vineyards that we have in the Champagne region. So it's surprisingly a small region for a wine that is so iconic. It's a fairly small region. So we are in the city of Reims. There's a kind of a mountain, they call the mountain itself, near Reims, and then it just opens up to these lovely kind of rolling plains of vineyards as far as the eye can see. It is a gorgeous place. It does not look this nice right now. It is probably raining. And I think actually they had snow this past week. So there you go. The interesting thing about the city of Reims is, number one, they pronounce it as Reims. I took Spanish in high school. I don't understand how phonetic French works, but Reims. And this is a photograph of the cathedral in Reims. And what's fascinating about the cathedral is this is where the kings of France are coronated. So for centuries, if you were the king of France, your coronation happened in the city of Reims. It did not happen in Versailles. It did not happen in Paris. It happened in this cathedral in the Champagne region. So very early on, the wines of the Champagne region were associated with royalty and celebration and luxury, which I think really kind of plays into this tradition that we still have to this day. So we're visiting the house of Veuve Clicquot. The name Veuve Clicquot, Veuve is widow in French. So it's the widow Clicquot. Clicquot was her married name. And the French pronounce Veuve very nicely. And I've talked to my colleagues and I said, what's the easiest way for Americans to understand how to pronounce this? And we worked it out that we rhyme it with love, which is, my God, so appropriate for Valentine's Day right now. And I just totally made that connection in my head. But so Veuve rhymes with love. Veuve Clicquot, the widow Clicquot. There's a book you can see on the left side of your screen. I have no financial connection to this book, but I do promote it all the time because it is a pretty fun read. Madame Clicquot takes over the house in 1805. She's 27 years old. And I would argue she is the first global business person, it's a big claim. I mean, she is legitimately, if not the first, one of the first global business people. And she takes this tiny little winery that honestly in 1805 was struggling, as a lot of wineries were, because we just had the revolution. Napoleon was in power. The Prussians were walking around blowing things up. And they had a span of 3 or 4 years of some of the worst weather in the region. And she takes over the house in 1805 at the age of 27. And when she retires, and when she eventually passes away at the age of 87, which is very unique as well, she has created one of the greatest champagne houses in the world, and is one of the wealthiest people in France. So it is a really amazing story. She was, for a person who did not have an MBA, she had an amazing business sense. So I'm sorry, I could talk about Madame Clicquot for hours upon hours. Let me just tell you a couple things that she did from a winemaking point of view, if you want to geek out with me for a second. From a winemaking point of view, she was the first. She and her winemaking team, or the House of Clicquot, they were the first to do a vintage champagne. So the first time that a year was on the label on a bottle of champagne was a bottle of Veuve Clicquot. You'll notice that we have, the bottle of Moet, we have the bottle of Clicquot with us tonight. Neither of those labels have years on them because the weather is so difficult that the winemakers are allowed to blend wines from previous years so they can make a wine that's consistent in style and quality. It would almost be impossible to make a vintage dated champagne every single year and have any sort of consistency in style, any sort of consistency in quality. Every now and then we have these amazing years, and they can make a wine that's 100% from that year. I hope that made sense. I've drank a lot of espresso today. So 1810, the first vintage champagne comes from Veuve Clicquot. 1816, she invents the Riddling Table. And the Riddling Table is a process of getting the yeast sediment out of the bottle. And what's so unique about this process, it's so simple. I mean, literally it's a rack where they would put the bottles into the rack and they would turn them every day and they would slowly move that yeast sediment down into the neck of the bottle. But what's so special about this process and the fact that she did this is that her wines were suddenly crystal clear, where everyone else's wines in the Champagne region had a little bit of sediment, a little cloudiness to them. And so this was a huge game changer in the Champagne region, this idea of what we call the riddling process, where they would literally turn these bottles every day for 3 or 4 months. And then in 1818, she invented the process that we use to make rosé to this day, the process that Shandon in California uses, the process that most sparkling wine houses use, started at Veuve Clicquot in 1818, and it's simply the idea of making a red wine and then pouring it into the white wine and making it pink that way. And what they like about that process, it's not easier by any means. There's some other ways you can do this. It's not easier. It's not cheaper. But what they like about this process is it gives you a more consistent color, consistent flavor, aroma, style. So it's just more consistent this way. It's harder. It's a little bit more time to do this process. So first vintage champagne, then riddling table, and then she invented the blending method for rosé champagne. Love her, love her, love her. And we talked about these 3 grapes a lot. I will say that the house style of Clicquot is driven by Pinot Noir. So everything they do is going to be heavy on the Pinot Noir, 50, 60% Pinot Noir. They make a prestige cuvée or tête de cuvée, or the pinnacle of the house. That is a wine called La Grande Dame, and that is 92% Pinot Noir. So the house of Clicquot loves their Pinot Noir. Oh, a chat challenge. Okay, what is our question? Which of the following was not an invention of Madame Clicquot? Which of the following? This is gonna be tricky. Okay. Oof. Let's see here. Lots of reading. I apologize. There's a lot of reading. All right. Which of the following was not something she did? So the first person to make white wine from red grapes. The Riddling Table. First vintage champagne. Or making rosé via the addition of still red wine. This is tricky.
We've actually got a really good mix of responses, so it must be a little bit tricky.
Do you want me to reveal the answer?
Let's reveal it.
Okay, here we go. Drum roll, please. There we go. So the correct answer is A. She was not the first person to make white wine from red grapes. Now, isn't it interesting? I should do that slide a while ago. I had the 3 grapes, right? Meunier is a red grape. Pinot Noir is a red grape. Chardonnay is a white grape, but we're making white wine traditionally, right? Most of Champagne is usually, it's white, it's clear. So someone had to be responsible for that. And the answer, the person who was responsible for making white wine from red grapes was Dom Pierre Perignon. So she invented the Riddling Table. She made the first vintage champagne. Thank you for that, Madame Clicquot. And she basically pioneered the idea of making rosé via the addition of still red Pinot Noir. Let's taste some Pinot Noir, please.
Congratulations to Karen Newman on that one.
Karen Newman, you're awesome. Okay, in your glass, you should have the Veuve Clicquot Rosé. Here are a couple fun factoids. It is a rosé version of their yellow label, their iconic yellow label. They're taking their yellow label and they're adding red Pinot Noir to it. About 12% of that bottle will be red Pinot Noir. In total, that means that bottle is, give or take, about 70% Pinot Noir. So a lot of Pinot Noir. And this is, think about it, very different from what we have with Shandon, which was driven by that Chardonnay. This is driven by Pinot Noir. And Pinot Noir brings, I think, a real structure to the wine, a weight, if you will, on the palate. I think of it as like it's the framework of the house, where Chardonnay is a much more brighter, fresher style of wine. We're going to get a little bit more of that breadiness, that yeastiness, because this wine is in the cellar for 3 years. So think about that. They made this wine, they laid it in the cellar, you know, from the time that the majority of the grapes are harvested to the time it reaches your store. We're talking maybe 4 years, 4.5 years. It's a lot of time involved to get this little bottle out. On the nose, you should get some notes of, you know, some little bit of spice. You get that lovely red fruit. You probably get some, maybe some apple. You get maybe some citrus. I think this wine shows off a slightly nice, almost bitterness to it. It doesn't sound like a positive thing, does it? Bitterness. But I think there's a hint of this lovely kind of bitterness to this wine. I really wanted to show this picture of the snow, but it won't let me do that. All right. Shannon, do we have any comments on this particular bubble?
Well, so we have a couple of questions not directly related to this one. I don't know if you want me to hold off on them or.
Sure, let's ask away.
All right. So we did have someone that was curious as to what wines the Shandon winery in India makes.
Oh, good question. So they make, actually, the interesting thing is this: everyone kind of makes the same general type of wine. So they make a Brut, they make a Brut Rosé. They'll make a wine that might be a sweeter style, and then they'll make one that's been aged for a lot longer. That is a good question. I have the data somewhere, but it's once again, and I know for India and I think China as well, it's very much driven by Chardonnay, but they are using small amounts. There's these 2 indigenous grapes in the region where they are in India that they're using, and I apologize, I don't remember the names, but I was not familiar with them from a normal, like, European grape tradition. So there are grapes I was not familiar with, but they use those. I will say the interesting thing in China is that they make a sparkling wine that's actually meant to be served room temperature. Because there's a thing in China where people traditionally don't like to drink cold beverages. And so they've engineered is not the right word, but they've crafted a wine that it will work with no chill. And I have not tasted it yet, but I'm super fascinated about that idea. So, sorry, answer is, I don't know. I don't know what the 2 grapes are. I can find out.
All right, our next question in our Zoom chat is, why is there such a huge price difference between Champagne and other sparkling wines? Is it due purely to the exclusivity of the region?
I'm sure that plays into it a bit, but I think you could legitimately, when you do the math on the production of Champagne. So there are a couple things going on. Number one, the houses. So these Champagne houses, they don't own the land. So the price for grapes fluctuates quite a bit. 87% of the land in Champagne is owned by farmers. Granted, you know, houses like Clicquot and Shendon have these long-term contracts with families. So it's you know, it's not a huge surprise every year, but it is, the raw material is fairly expensive to start. Number 2, there's a time element as well. So there's a lot more time that goes into making Champagne than it does in other regions of the world. I mean, if you think about the yellow label from Clicquot, that is a wine that is aged for 3 years. and it will have blends of wine in it going back sometimes 20, 22, 23 years. So there's this element of time, which is the fact that the wines have to be stored, have to be maintained, have to be checked. So it involves, there's actual labor involved with as well. So to me, and the person asked the question is right. There's a scarcity issue as well. We will never have enough champagne, right? Champagne is 0.5% of wine in the world. Very often the demand is more than the supply, but at the same time, it is an expensive product to produce. And there's a lot of time involved, and time is the most valuable thing in the world.
Awesome. Last one before I let you get back to your presentation. This one's going to probably be a little subjective, but we have someone asking what a typical price point would be for a quality champagne or sparkling wine. It's really going to be how you define quality, but I think they're just kind of looking for, a typical price range.
So I think that's a good question, because and I'm not trying to just promote Champagne here, but the great thing about Champagne is that the Champagne region is super regulated and super controlled. And so, I'd always argue that even the worst bottle of champagne, whatever that would be, would actually still be a pretty decent bottle. And so it so depends on the market, because as we know, in the United States, every state has their own pricing. And so in the United States, the sweet spot, I think, on the shelves is like mid-30s to 50. That's where you see a lot of the non-vintage champagnes. If you go overseas, especially in England, the prices go down quite a bit. That's a much bigger market for champagne, and they also get like grocery stores will have their own private labels. And so it gets hyper competitive. So prices can drop down a lot more in England than it would in the United States. In terms of quality in the Champagne region, I think one of the great values in the Champagne region is the vintage category. So if you imagine like a little pyramid here, the bottom of the pyramid is the non-vintage. So we have a great example on the screen, the Veuve Clicquot Yellow Label. That is the cornerstone of the house. That's the flagship. And that makes up the bulk of what they make. We have a tiny little percentage of wine, which I just refer to as vintage. There's a year on the label. And then right above that is your prestige cuvee. That's your Dom Perignon. That is your Le Grand Dame for Clicquot. But going back to that little vintage category, those are some amazing bottles. They see a lot of time in the cellar. You can pick them up for anywhere from like the $90 to $110, $120 price point. To me, they're this kind of very everyday luxury. It's like, this is not like a big anniversary dinner, but it's like a pretty nice day we're having, and I want to have something that one step up, and you can get a real bang for your buck. And then I don't want to sound like I'm promoting certain brands and products, but the Clicquot vintage champagne is such a stellar bottle of wine, and people don't ever think about that they make a vintage. There's not a lot of it made, so it has a nice rarity to it as well. And then Moet and Shandon also makes a vintage, and I think that little vintage category is amazing. For the rest of the world, it gets a little tricky because once again, we don't have, like in the United States, we don't have a ton of regulation and control, and so labeling can be a little, wonky. And so I think for, say, California sparkling, or say, that tends to be around like a $20, $30 price point, give or take. I'm sure someone in our sales department's yelling at me like, no, but that's what I think. You have the lower price, the Prosecco, stuff like that can be around that $10, $15 price point. But it gets tricky. Outside of Champagne, it gets tricky in terms of quality and price. And it's just one of those cases of you do some research, you talk to some people. I mean, one of my things is just talk to the people in the wine store and say, hey, let's say you're looking for a domestic sparkling wine. Like, what's like the fanciest one here that you have that shows a lot of age and a lot of complexity? For California, you can get a high-end bottle for $70, $80, $90, I think, in some cases. So once again, I'm not sure I answered that question at all.
No, I thought that was great. I actually was taking a couple of notes myself.
Sure, my salesperson will yell at me for some price quote that I don't understand pricing. Okay, so we move on to our last wine.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's so sad. Our evening's coming to an end. Oh my God, there's a chat challenge.
Surprise.
I was totally not expecting this. How does the rosé of Love Clicquot become pink? How does it become pink? Because it's a white wine, right? You start with a white wine. So how does it become pink? I didn't mention one of the things that makes these wines so expensive is that unicorns are involved.
We actually have a couple people responding with that. So
Good. All right. I'll high five everyone who responded with the unicorns. Should I reveal the correct answer?
let's do it.
There you go. The addition of Pinot Noir.
Awesome. Congratulations, Judy Merriman.
Yay, Judy. Let's get back in the car. Go for a drive. So we were in the city of Reims, and I showed you that little map. It was like Reims to Epernay is about 30 minutes, and the drive is gorgeous. You drive through basically what's a national kind of park for about 15 minutes. And it's, if you just imagine we're driving and it's just tall trees, like a canyon, and you can't really see anything. You can look this up on Google Maps and you'll see that the park kind of suddenly ends and you have vineyards. And what's great about this drive is you've got trees, 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 and then suddenly the road drops and, sorry, there we go. The road drops and suddenly you're in a valley and you're surrounded by vineyards. And if you time this, especially in the morning, a little fog, everything's got a little dew on it. It's a pretty spectacular view. Dare I say, romantic. There you go. All right. Once again, it doesn't look like this right now. It's pretty miserable, but look at that lovely hot air balloon we have here. This little building you see in the distance, it does belong to Moet and Shandon. And the first time I went to Champaign, we went to this particular vineyard. It was legitimately breathtaking. But I did go up and look inside that little house, and it's just a bunch of like pruning equipment. I don't know what I was expecting, but it's this lovely, iconic little building on this hill, and it's a functional building. They store equipment there for pruning the vines. I don't know what I was expecting. Something magic. Let's talk about the name. The family name is Moet. They were from Flanders, so Belgium, and the name is Dutch in origin. And so, on my first day at work, I said Moet. I was quickly corrected, and it's Moet. You actually do pronounce that T. And my French colleagues tell me that there's also a bunch of grammar rules that would also tell you that you pronounce that T. And this is the world's most loved champagne. So every second of every day, there's a bottle of Moet and Shendon being opened. And what I think is interesting with Moet, from a winemaker point of view, they are basically making this icon of the Champagne region. That is a lot of pressure. Like every time they make these wines, they, like I said, this is the most popular champagne, most beloved champagne in the world. And to me, I think about that pressure that goes into making that. The house was founded back in 1743, and our founder very quickly basically got wines into the royal courts of Europe. And so every king and queen all through Europe and into Russia, they were drinking the wines of Moet. And I love that fact because once again, we're cementing the tradition of these wines being used for celebration, for royalty, for luxury. 1787 arrives in the United States. It's been here for quite a while. Here we are signing the Constitution, and they have done. Photoshopped. And here's a fun little factoid. Dan Gurney in the 1950s had won Le Mans, and he got up on the stage and shook his bottle of Moet and sprayed the crowd. And so the first documented time we have someone spraying a crowd or other people with a bottle of champagne in celebration on the podium happens with a bottle of Moet and Shandon. It's such a fun little fact. You think about, oh yeah, this is done all the time. But it started with Moet and Shandon. And then we are proud sponsors of the Golden Globes. Over 7,000 glasses served at the Golden Globes Award. How crazy is that? It's probably not this year, but there you go. And then let me just one quick note on sourcing of fruits. What makes, I think, Moet super special is that they basically have contracts with the best growers, and they have vineyards in the best villages in the Champagne region in terms of ingredients. You know, it's like they've been given the Amex Gold card or the Amex Black card, and they're going to, you know, the nicest butcher shop and the fanciest produce shop and Whole Foods or whatever to buy the ingredients for dinner. They have access to the best of the best. And this is, I think, one of the great things I love about Moet and Shendon. We've talked about these three grapes, of course, over and over again. The interesting thing with Moet, and we'll taste in 1 second, I promise, the interesting thing with Moet is that they try to actually mirror the percentage of these grapes that are planted in the region. So it's about 38% Pinot Noir and about 31 Chardonnay and 31 Meunier in terms of the plantings in the region of Champagne. That is kind of their goal at Moet and Shendon, is to match those plantings. So whereas I said that Clicquot was all about Pinot Noir, and we learned that Shandon was all about Chardonnay, Moet is about Champagne. Moet is about the Champagne region. If we woke up tomorrow morning and suddenly it was 43% Chardonnay and the other percentages would change, this is what they would be using. They want to match the terroir of the Champagne region. And you have the Rosé Imperial, and the Imperial name came from Napoleon, who was a big fan of Moet. He and Jean-Remy Moet were best friends. They had met years earlier. They kept in touch via LinkedIn or something. And Napoleon would actually stop by the winery on his way to various battlefields and pick up some bottles, spend the night. And they named their flagship Imperial after Napoleon. It was the 100th anniversary of his birth in 1869. Oh my God, I think this is our last chat challenge, I believe. I should have really asked this later because I just told you this, but what grape varieties are used to create Moet and Shendon Brut Imperial? Or really, honestly, to create any Moet and Shendon? Okay, are we Chardonnay Pinot Noir based, Chardonnay based, equal amounts, or Pinot Noir based? What is the predominant grape used by our friends at Moet and Shendon? I taste a little bit of Pinot Noir. I taste a little bit of Chardonnay. Can I do the answer?
Yeah, you can.
There you go. Equal amounts. Remember, we're trying to basically mirror the terroir of the region. Who's our winner?
Congratulations to Tom Vinci.
Tom, yes. Okay, let's taste. Hope you have your glass. If you kind of remember back tasting through the other two wines, this has a really, I think, robust color. It is the easiest in terms of food pairings. It will pair with everything. All night, I've been talking about the fact that you make rosé by adding, red Pinot Noir. Team at Moet, of course, does things a little differently. And they're actually making a red Meunier and a red Pinot Noir. So they're making two red wines, and they're adding that to the blend. I think they're the only Champagne house that does that. And it's interesting because what Meunier brings to the table is Meunier brings some lovely kind of ripe, fleshy fruits. So think about more peaches, pears, kind of very much that fleshiness. But then it also brings some extra. They can kind of get this very robust color, but they get slightly different fruit profile because Pinot Noir will tend to be a lot more structure. You can get a little bit more bitterness from the tannins with Pinot Noir, but with Meunier, it's a lot more of a softer, fleshier quality. You get that same amount of color. And then this is a very dry wine. So you get this kind of soft fleshiness. You get some great, bright, refreshing acidity. But at the same time, you get this gorgeous kind of mouthfeel. I think that's that Meunier influence. What do we think? Cheers, y'all. Happy almost Valentine's Day. is there anything wrong with that glass of wine? That's a lovely glass of wine. I mean, they all have been. This is not a bad evening. Shannon, any questions on this wine?
Well, so we actually do have an interesting question, which I think you may have covered. But to confirm, the Meunier isn't available as a single varietal, correct? Except in, you said, I believe, in California at the Shandon.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never say never because there's probably someone out there doing it. So there are a couple tiny producers in the Champaign region that will do a 100% Meunier. I've seen, like, these are not wines that are easy to find traditionally. There are a few tiny little producers, and please don't ask me their names because I'd have to look them up. In California, like I said, I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone else doing Meunier, but I know that Shendon does. And it's a really interesting wine because it reminds you a lot of Pinot Noir, but it's like a different spice kind of blend, if you will. But it's also got that lovely kind of roundness. If anyone out there is a fan, I love Grenache. I'm a big fan of the Grenache grape. To me, it can do no wrong. And I feel like Meunier, especially in California, has that same kind of juicy, fleshy, kind of round quality, but it's got acidity to it as well. So it's a nice balance. So, but yeah, never say never. But I think honestly, Shandon is probably the largest producer of a 100% Meunier wine, possibly in the world. That might be a pretty safe statement.
Awesome. All right. Well, this one again is going to be a little subjective, but it's your own personal preference. So someone on Facebook is actually curious what your personal favorite champagne or sparkling wine would be.
Oh, good. Oh, Lord.
I know we said no tough questions, and I figure this one probably is going to be your toughest.
Okay. It's I can answer this pretty easily. Just for regular champagne, the thing that's in my refrigerator, my wine fridge that I have 2 racks worth, is Krug Grand Cuvée. To me, it's a wine that has made my eyes well up on numerous occasions, and I'm not making this up. In terms of rosé, actually, I adore the Moet that we're having right now, but I have to say, oh my God, I can't. The Le Grand Dame from Clicquot is, so let's talk fancy ones real quick. The Le Grand Dame Rosé from Clicquot is super rare, and I get excited when I see that wine. But the other kind of, in terms of the fancy realm, is Dom Perignon Rosé. It is powerful. It is dark. It grabs you by the lapel. It is amazing with food. We moved into this apartment. We had the classic, like, furniture was not really put together yet, so we sat on the floor and we ordered a pizza and had a bottle of Dom Perignon, and that was pretty awesome. But yeah, but I think these non-vintage rosés, like the ones you're tasting, and once again, I don't want to just be promoting these, but I think they have such great balance. They have that red fruit, they have the tannins, they have that great refreshing acidity. From a food point of view, they go so well. I mean, this should be everyone's go-to Valentine's Day dinner wine, because it will pair with everything. There's just something inherently romantic about a glass of rosé. But my favorite champagne, Krug Grand Cuvée.
Awesome. All right.
I get so many notes after this. They're like
emails coming in all weekend.
Stop talking about Krug.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so awesome.
Shannon, it's always a pleasure.
Yes, I have learned so much. I keep seeing comments about how great this presentation was across the Zoom chat, which has been so great. For those of you that are joining us tonight, thank you so much for making these Love and Libation series super fun and just, overall a great time for everyone. have a great weekend to all, and happy Valentine's Day. I hope everyone has a bottle of bubbly to pop at home with your loved ones, safely, of course. Don't point at any eyes or anything like that. And yes, enjoy your holiday.
Yeah, I hope to see everyone in real life at some point.
I know, fingers
Please.
crossed that we can get back to somewhat normalcy a little bit by next year so that we can carry on with our typical 90 days, or excuse me, the Winter Wine Spectacular events that we typically run.
Yeah, so everyone who attends this, remember my face. And if I'm in New Hampshire and I'm there for work, if I'm on vacation, I'm not going to honor this. But if I'm there for work and you're like, hey, I attended your Rosé thing, I will buy you a cocktail and high five you.
I might follow
Those
you
two
up on
things,
that.
high five and a cocktail. All right, excellent.
All
Cheers,
right, well,
Shannon.
thank you so much and have a great night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.